Yuletide Witches of the Frozen North. The rescue team found the cabin on December 27th, 3 days after Ethan Marlowe stopped answering his satellite phone. 2 days after his partner called from Seattle, frantic, begging someone to check on him. 1 day after the blizzard finally broke and the helicopters could fly. Ranger Diane Kowalski was first through the door. The smell hit her before anything else. Not rot, not death. Something older, pine sap and burnt hair and something metallic underneath, copper mixed with frost. The kind of smell that crawled into your sinuses and nested there. The cabin's interior looked wrong. Furniture shoved against walls, the wooden floor scarred with symbols, carved deep, deliberate, the grooves still sticky with something dark. Candles burned in a circle near the fireplace, wax pooled around them in patterns that seemed almost intentional, almost like writing, and in the center of the room, arranged in a spiral that made Diane's eyes water to follow, sat 37 human teeth. Adult teeth, roots still wet, some with fillings that glinted in the pale winter light. No blood, no body, just the teeth, the symbols, and a single photograph pinned to the wall. Diane approached it slowly. The photograph showed a woman, a neighbor from 3 miles down the mountain. Margaret Hess, 64 years old, reported missing 2 weeks ago. But in the photograph, Margaret wasn't right. Her face seemed loose somehow, ill-fitting, like a mask pulled too tight in some places and sagging in others. And her eyes were completely black. No whites, no iris, just darkness that seemed to swallow the camera flash. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that shook and stuttered, someone had written 4 words. "She's wearing Margaret now." Diane's radio crackled. Static. Then something else. A woman's voice. Singing. Silent Night. The melody was beautiful. Too beautiful. Perfect in a way human voices never quite achieve, and it was coming from the tree line. Before we begin, I want to thank every soul that keeps returning to listen. You've turned whispers into echoes. If you haven't already, subscribe and stay close, because what you're about to hear is one story you won't forget. Dr. Helena Cross had spent 30 years studying folklore. She studied folklore because she understood what most scholars refused to accept. The old stories weren't metaphors. They weren't cultural expressions or primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. They were warnings. Her office at the University of Alaska Fairbanks was cramped with evidence. Audio recordings from survivors. Photographs of symbols carved into frozen trees. A jar of teeth that a hiker had found arranged in a perfect circle on a mountain trail in 1987. And 4 manila folders, each containing a transcript that would never be published. 4 confessions, 4 survivors who had encountered what lived in the Alaskan wilderness when the nights grew longest. Helena had promised each of them anonymity, had promised she would never share their stories publicly, but promises made to the living sometimes had to bend when the dead started piling up. The rescue team had found Ethan Marlowe's cabin 3 days ago. The symbols on his floor matched the ones in Helena's photographs exactly. The teeth matched the pattern from 4 other disappearances over the past decade. Something was escalating, something was hungry, and the only way Helena knew to fight it was with the truth that the survivors had whispered into her recorder, voices shaking, eyes haunted by things that refused to stay in the past. She opened the first folder. Ethan Marlowe, 34 years old, survived December 23rd of last year. Recorded his confession 6 months later, still trembling. Helena pressed play, and Ethan's voice filled the room, broken, barely above a whisper, telling a story that would curdle the blood of anyone foolish enough to listen. Ethan Marlowe had always loved the isolation. That's why he'd bought the cabin in the first place, 40 miles from the nearest town. No cell service, no neighbors except Margaret Hess, 3 miles down the mountain, and she kept to herself. Just snow and silence and the kind of peace that city life had stolen from him years ago. His partner David understood. They'd agreed. Ethan would stay for the holidays while David visited family in Seattle. 2 weeks of solitude, reading by the fire, watching the snow fall. Healing from a year that had carved pieces out of both of them. The first 3 days were perfect. On the fourth night, Ethan heard singing. He was washing dishes when it reached him, faint at first, threading through the whisper of wind against the windows. A woman's voice, familiar melody. Silent night. But the voice was wrong, too smooth, too pure, like crystal vibrating at a frequency just beyond human capability. Ethan dried his hands and went to the window. The moon was full, casting blue shadows across the snow. The tree line stood maybe 50 yards away, a wall of black spruce heavy with ice, and at the edge of those trees, barely visible, stood a figure. A woman. She wore a thin nightgown despite the cold, barefoot in the snow, and she was singing, her voice carrying impossibly clear across the frozen distance. Ethan's first thought was concern, someone lost, hypothermic. He grabbed his coat, then the woman turned toward the cabin, and the moonlight caught her face. Margaret Hess. But not Margaret Hess. The face was Margaret's. Ethan recognized the shape of her jaw, the way her gray hair fell past her shoulders. But it sat wrong on the skull beneath it, loose in places, stretched in others. And when she smiled, the expression didn't reach her eyes, because her eyes were black, entirely black, pits of darkness that swallowed the moonlight. Ethan stumbled back from the window. The singing stopped. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Margaret, the thing wearing Margaret, raised one hand and pointed at the cabin, at Ethan. And her mouth opened wide, wider than any human mouth should open, and a sound came out, not singing anymore, something else, a series of clicks and whistles, a language that predated words. The tree line responded. Ethan saw them then, small shapes detaching from the branches, wings catching moonlight, faces that might have been beautiful once, before they became sharp and hungry, glass-winged creatures no bigger than his hand, with eyes like frozen amber and teeth like needles. Fairies. The word rose unbidden in Ethan's mind, but not the fairies from children's books. These were something older, something feral, servants of whatever wore Margaret's face like a costume. They flew toward the cabin, dozens of them. Their wings made a sound like ice cracking. Ethan ran. He bolted for the back door, grabbed his emergency bag, and plunged into the night. The cold hit him like a wall, 40 below, the kind of cold that could kill in minutes if you stopped moving. But behind him, the singing resumed, and above him, those glass wings caught the moonlight. He ran for 3 hours, through snow that reached his waist, through trees that seemed to shift position when he wasn't looking, through a darkness so complete that the only light came from those things fluttering overhead, their bodies glowing faintly with a cold blue light. The witch, he knew now that's what it was, knew the stories his grandmother had told him before she died. The witch didn't chase him. She walked, steady, patient, following his trail through the snow like she had all the time in the world. Because she did. The fairies were her hounds, her scouts. They circled and dove, never quite touching him, but driving him in a specific direction, herding him toward something. He found it at dawn, a circle of stones in a clearing, symbols carved into frozen ground, and in the center of that circle, hanging from a wooden frame, was what remained of the real Margaret Hess. What remained was mostly bones now, picked clean, arranged with terrible precision. Ethan's legs gave out. The singing grew closer, and then sunrise, true sunrise, not the gray pre-dawn that Alaska called morning, but actual sunlight cresting the mountains and spilling into the clearing. The fairies shrieked, a sound like breaking glass. They scattered for the shadows of the trees. And behind him, the singing stopped abruptly, replaced by a scream of pure rage. Ethan didn't look back. He ran toward the light, toward the sun, and he kept running until he stumbled onto a logging road 8 miles from his cabin, and a truck driver found him frostbitten and weeping, unable to explain what he'd seen. He never went back for his things. He never went back to Alaska, and every night, even now, he hears singing outside his window. Faint, distant, waiting for the sun to fail. Terrell Sanders was 6 years old when the witch marked him. He didn't know that's what she was then. He just knew she was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. Tall and pale, with hair the color of fresh snow, wearing a white dress at the Fairbanks Winter Festival, while everyone else bundled in parkas and fur. His mother was buying hot chocolate. His father was taking photographs of the ice sculptures. Tyrrell had wandered toward the craft tents, drawn by colored lights and the sound of laughter. She found him by the candle display. Her voice was soft, musical. It made Tyrrell think of wind chimes and icicles catching sunlight. "You have magic in your blood," she said. "Has anyone ever told you that?" Tyrrell shook his head. The woman smiled. Her teeth were very white, very straight. Looking back, Tyrrell understood they were too perfect, too uniform, like something manufactured rather than grown. "I can see it burning under your skin. Such potential, such power, but it needs to be unlocked." She reached out and touched his cheek. Her fingers were cold, painfully cold, and where they touched, Tyrrell felt something shift inside him, something wake up. "There," she whispered. "The pact is begun. When you're ready to finish it, I'll come for you." His mother's voice cut through the moment, sharp, frightened. "Tyrrell, get away from her." The woman's smile didn't falter. She looked at Tyrrell's mother with eyes that seemed, for just a moment, to swirl with something like snow. "Another time, then." She walked into the crowd. Tyrrell's mother grabbed him, held him tight, demanded to know what the woman had said. But when they looked for her, she was gone, vanished like frost in sunshine. His mother took him home, drew a bath, scrubbed his cheek until it was raw, and that night she burned something in the backyard, herbs and salt and pages torn from an old book. She never explained what it was. She never explained anything. The protection, whatever it was, didn't work. Tyrrell was 9 the first New Year's Eve she came back. He was sleeping when the tapping started, light, rhythmic, on his bedroom window. He thought it was branches at first, but when he pulled back the curtain, he saw them. Fairies, dozens of them, clinging to the glass with fingers like twigs, wings like frozen spider webs, watching him with eyes that reflected light they shouldn't have been able to see. And beyond them, at the edge of the yard, the woman stood, still wearing white, still beautiful, still smiling that too perfect smile. She lifted one hand and beckoned. Tyrrell screamed. His parents came running. His father saw nothing, said the yard was empty, said Tyrrell was dreaming. But his mother saw. Tyrrell knew because she went pale and started praying in a language he didn't understand. They moved the next month. New city, new house, new school, it didn't matter. Every New Year's Eve she found him. The tapping would start around midnight. The fairies would gather at whatever window was closest to his bed. And the woman would stand somewhere nearby, a yard, a street corner, a parking lot, waiting, patient, growing older each year, but never less beautiful. Tyrrell was 12 when he finally worked up the courage to speak to her through the glass. "What do you want?" Her voice carried easily, despite the barrier. That same musical quality, that same terrible softness. "To finish what we started, Tyrrell, the pact requires completion. Blood for blood, magic for magic. You accepted my gift. Now you must accept your obligation." "I was 6. I didn't understand." "Understanding is not required. Consent is not required. The old ways do not bend to modern notions of fairness." She tilted her head. "But I am patient. I can wait until you are ready, until the weight of carrying all that locked magic becomes too heavy. Then you will come to me willingly." The fairies scraped their fingers down the glass. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, like bones grinding together. Tyrrell stopped speaking to her after that. He was 23 now. Every New Year's Eve for 17 years she had come, sometimes with more fairies, sometimes with symbols drawn in frost on his windows, always patient, always waiting. His parents were dead now. Cancer took his father. A car accident took his mother, though Tyrrell sometimes wondered if that accident was really an accident. The brakes had failed on black ice on December 30th, 3 hours after his mother had told Tyrrell she'd found a way to break the pact. The witch had looked particularly satisfied the following New Year's Eve. Tyrrell had tried everything: salt barriers, iron horseshoes, prayers from 6 different religions. a shaman in New Mexico who charged him $5,000 and accomplished nothing. A Catholic priest who performed an exorcism that made the fairies laugh, actually laugh, their voices like cracking ice. Nothing worked, because it wasn't a possession, it wasn't a haunting, it was a debt, and the witch would collect. The last time Tyrell spoke to Dr. Cross, his confession wavering, his hands shaking, he said something that haunted her. I can feel it now. The magic she put in me, growing, pressing against my skin. Sometimes at night my fingers go numb, and when I look at them, frost is forming on my nails. I'm becoming something, changing into something, and I don't know if I can stop it. He paused. This New Year's Eve might be the last one. Either I go to her, or I become like her. Dr. Cross tried to contact Tyrell after that recording. He never answered. Frank Carver loved traditions. That's what he told himself when he proposed the idea, a real Christmas tree hunt. Not some plastic thing from a department store, not even a pre-cut tree from a lot. No, they would drive into the mountains, find the perfect tree, and cut it down themselves, the way his grandfather had done, the way Christmas was supposed to feel. His wife Marissa agreed, mostly to see the smile on their son's face. Eli was 7, obsessed with everything forest-related, and the prospect of hiking through actual Alaskan wilderness to find their tree had him vibrating with excitement for weeks. They left on December 21st, the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Frank didn't think about that, didn't know it mattered. The Forest Service had approved their permit for a specific area, 3 miles up a logging road, then a 2-mile hike to a valley thick with young pines. They arrived mid-morning, the sky heavy with clouds that promised snow by evening. The hike was beautiful. Eli ran ahead on the trail, his red coat bright against the white snow. Marissa held Frank's hand, and for the first time in months, the stress of work and bills and the grind of daily life seemed distant, forgettable. They found the tree around noon, a perfect 6-footer, full and symmetrical. Eli declared it the best tree in the whole forest, and Frank couldn't disagree. He was halfway through sawing the trunk when Marissa made a sound, small, strangled, like something had caught in her throat. Frank looked up. A girl stood between the trees, maybe 10 years old, barefoot despite the snow. Her skin was pale, not white, not albino, but pale like something that had never seen sun. Her hair hung past her waist, each strand rigid and glittering, like icicles, like frozen water given the shape of human hair, and her eyes. Her eyes were full of snow, swirling, endless, a blizzard contained in 2 small sockets, no iris, no pupil, just white motion. She smiled at them. "You're cutting my sister," she said. Her voice was young but ancient, layered, like multiple people speaking the same words slightly out of sync. Frank dropped the saw, pulled Eli behind him. Marissa grabbed her son's hand tight. "We have a permit," Frank said. Stupid. Absurd. But his brain reached for normalcy like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. "We're allowed to be here." The girl's smile widened. Her teeth were sharp, translucent, like teeth carved from ice. "Permits." She tasted the word. "The witch mothers don't recognize permits. This forest belongs to the coven, has belonged to the coven since before your ancestors crawled out of their caves, and you're cutting down one of my sisters." She looked at the tree, at the saw buried in its trunk. "Blood demands blood. The old law, surely you know it." Frank's hand found Marissa's. They stepped back slowly. Eli was crying now, silent tears freezing on his cheeks. "We'll leave," Marissa said. "We'll leave right now, please." The girl tilted her head. The motion was wrong. Too far, too smooth, like her neck had too many joints. "Leave? But you've only just arrived, and the solstice feast hasn't started yet." She raised one hand, snapped her fingers. The forest came alive. Symbols flared on tree trunks, carved deep into bark, glowing with pale blue light. Frank hadn't seen them before, hadn't noticed them, but now they were everywhere, forming a perimeter, a cage. And in the branches above, shapes began to move. Fairies, Dozens of them, hundreds. They leaped between trees like glowing insects, their wings catching the light of the cymbals, their laughter filling the air like breaking glass. "Run," the girl suggested. "It's more fun when you run." They ran. Frank carried Eli. Marissa sprinted beside him. The trail they'd walked up had vanished somehow, or the forest had shifted, moved, rearranged itself while they weren't looking. Every direction looked the same. Trees and snow and those terrible symbols glowing in the dim light. The fairies followed, herding, driving, sometimes diving close enough to slice exposed skin with claws like frozen needles, sometimes just laughing, that icicle crack sound that would live in Eli's nightmares forever. They found the truck after what felt like hours. The logging road was where they'd left it. The truck sat waiting, covered in fresh snow. Frank yanked open the door. The tires were shredded, all 4 of them, slashed by claws that had left gouges in the rubber deep enough to see metal, and standing in the road behind them, arranged in a semicircle, were the witches. 7 of them, women of various ages, young and old, tall and short, but all with that same too pale skin, all barefoot in the snow, all with eyes full of swirling white. The girl from the forest stood at their center. She wasn't smiling anymore. "The solstice sun sets in 1 hour," she said. "When darkness falls, the feast begins. You may run until then. We enjoy the chase." Marissa stepped forward. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady. "Take me. Let my family go. Take me instead." The witches looked at each other. Something passed between them. Amusement, perhaps. Consideration. "A mother's bargain," one of the older witches said. "The old magic recognizes sacrifice. Will you truly give yourself, freely, knowing what we are, knowing what we do to those we take?" Marissa nodded. The witches whispered among themselves. The fairies settled in the trees, watching. "Accepted," the girl finally said. "The mother stays. The father and child may go, but—" she held up one finger. "The boy carries our mark now. He has seen us, breathed the air of our territory, walked the paths of the Coven's forest. When he comes of age, we will call, and he will answer." Frank tried to protest, tried to fight. Marissa silenced him with a look. "Take Eli," she said. "Walk until you reach the highway. Don't look back. Don't come back. And when he's older, tell him I love him. Tell him I'm sorry." Frank walked, carrying his son, fighting every instinct to turn around to see what was happening behind him. He heard his wife scream once, just once, a sound that severed something in his chest that would never heal. Then silence. He reached the highway 3 hours later, flagged down a passing truck, told a story about getting lost, about his wife falling through thin ice. A story no one believed, but everyone accepted because the truth was impossible. Eli was silent for 6 months after that, and sometimes, late at night, Frank catches his son staring out the window, at something in the tree line, something only Eli can see. The boy is 14 now, 3 more years until he comes of age. Frank doesn't know what he'll do when the witches call. He doesn't know if he can stop it. Mika Crest was 9 years old on the night Santa came to collect. Her mother worked double shifts at the cannery most of December, holiday overtime, time and a half, money they desperately needed. Her father had left 3 years ago, so Mika was used to being alone, used to heating up frozen dinners and watching television until her eyes blurred. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Her mother wouldn't be home until midnight. Mika had just finished her macaroni when the knock came. 3 slow thuds on the front door. Heavy, deliberate. She wasn't supposed to answer for strangers. Her mother had drilled that rule into her bones. But something made Mika walk to the door anyway. Something like curiosity. Something like compulsion, like invisible fingers pressing against her back. She looked through the peephole. A Santa stood on the porch. Red suit, black boots, white trim, all the right pieces, but wrong. The suit was old, faded in patches, and wet, dripping something dark onto the wooden porch, something thicker than melted snow, something that caught the porch light and gleamed like oil, and the face. Mika's breath stopped. Santa wore a mask, but not a plastic mask. Not a rubber mask, a mask made of skin, human skin, stitched together from at least 3 different faces. She could see the seams, the mismatched tones, the places where the skin puckered around black thread. The mouth was the worst part. It smiled, but the smile was made from 2 different mouths sewn together, and they didn't quite align. One side lifted higher than the other. One side had too many teeth. On Santa's shoulders, something moved. Small shapes, clinging to his suit, wings folded against their backs, tiny faces that turned toward the peephole as if they could see Mika watching. Fairies. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering something. Let him in. Let him in. The witch father comes. Let him in. Let him in. A Christmas rhyme. Ancient. Wrong. Santa raised one hand and knocked again. Slower this time. The sound echoed through the house like a heartbeat. Little Mika. His voice was deep, layered, like stones grinding together. Your name is on my list, marked by the coven when you were born, promised to the winter before you could speak. Mika backed away from the door. I know you're there, little one. I can smell the magic in your marrow, the same magic that runs through all the children of this town, the children whose grandmothers made bargains they never intended to keep. He pressed his stitched face against the peephole. The skin stretched. Mika could see the sutures straining. Open the door. Let me in. I bring gifts for good children. Such wonderful gifts. His smile stretched wider. But for children who refuse, for children who break the old bargains, I bring something else. The fairies chittered. Their wings began to vibrate, a sound like 1,000 tiny bones rattling together. Mika ran. She grabbed the phone, dialed her mother's number. Nothing. No signal. The line was dead. Or something had cut it. The knocking continued. Steady. Patient. Your grandmother promised Mika. Christmas Eve, 1987. Her firstborn daughter's firstborn daughter. That's you. That's always been you. The debt is due. The collection has come. Mika hid in her mother's closet, pulled clothes over her head, pressed her hands against her ears. But she could still hear him, still hear the fairies singing their terrible rhyme. Witch father comes on Christmas night to take the ones marked by the right. Open the door, let him inside, or in the snow your bones will hide. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a new sound. Scratching. At the windows, at the walls, at every entrance to the house. The fairies were testing the seals, looking for gaps. Mika's grandmother had done something right, at least. She'd salted the windowsills. She'd hung iron horseshoes over the doors. She'd known the witches would come eventually, had tried to prepare, but the barriers wouldn't last forever. The scratching continued, hour after hour, and through it all, Santa waited on the porch, never moving, never speaking, just waiting with that stitched smile, patient as a grave. At midnight, her mother came home. Mika heard the car in the driveway, heard her mother's footsteps on the porch, heard her mother's voice, confused, angry, demanding to know who the man in the Santa suit was and why he was blocking the door. Then she heard her mother scream, short, cut off, like a hand had closed around her throat. Then silence. When Mika finally emerged from the closet, hours later, after the sun rose, she found the front door open. Snow had drifted into the hallway. Her mother's car sat in the driveway, engine still running, but her mother was gone, and on the porch, arranged in a neat spiral, sat 13 human teeth. Adult teeth, fresh, a message, a warning, a promise. Mika is 19 now. She left Alaska the day she turned 18, changed her name, cut all ties to her hometown. But every Christmas Eve, no matter where she is, she hears it, knocking, 3 slow thuds, and a voice that sounds like grinding stones, whispering through the wood. Soon, little Mika, soon.